The man ran at a steady pace across the now barren grassland. What was once covered in growing grasses and flowers was now just dirt and dust. While it made it easier to run on, it was also easier for an enemy to follow his trail, especially when they could just head for the dust being kicked up by the pounding of his feet. And that was precisely what the double handful of brutish-looking aliens were doing. The Hivi were struggling to maintain the humans' pace, but enjoying themselves nonetheless. They were intelligent apex pack hunters on their homeworld, before the Alei came and genetically modified them to serve in their armies. They were bipedal creatures, with features like a Terran hyena. Chasing fleeing prey was instinctive for them, and that is why the Alei used them to hunt escaped slaves, or to track enemy fighters in war. The subjugation of this world had left few chances to hunt a wild human, so they holstered their weapons and hunted in the old ways. It was just a matter of time until the human exhausted itself, and they could catch him. And so they let the human run, arms pumping and focused on the ground ahead, with only an occasional glance behind him. Before long, it became obvious to the aliens he was heading towards the rocky hills ahead. Their prey was beginning to slow, his energy must be finally dwindling, and they'd catch him soon. He wouldn't get far in those hills. One of the aliens began to unlimber his weapon, but an order from the unit's alpha put a stop to that. Trying to fire on the run was a waste of ammo, and stopping to fire wouldn't be any more accurate against a moving target at the current range. Their weapons were made to deliver heavy amounts of damage at the cost of range. And he wanted the up-close kill, to feel the prey's flesh rip under claw and fang, to smell its blood flow onto the ground. The human was almost to the hills when he stumbled and fell. He got back up, but now he was limping. His pursuers yelled at his misfortune. They had him now. Before he could stop them, several of his pack unlimbered their pulse rifles and fired at the prey. The range was still long, so most of the pulse rifle shots fell short, or passed far over the man's head. But right as he reached a large pile of rocks, a scream and a fall signaled a hit. But the man wasn't dead. He managed to crawl behind the rocks. The Alpha screamed his outrage at his pack, who shrank back in terror. What's done is done, and it was time to end the hunt. Signaling to its men, the Alpha slowed and motioned for its men to spread out and approach the rocks. The Alpha listened intently, but heard no movement from the other side. It cautiously approached the pile and began to move around the side, examining the large pool of blood soaking into the ground. He breathed in the scent of blood. It caused a heady feeling to wash over him. He could smell the human's sweat and hear his heartbeat. With a toothy grin, he stepped around the rock to face the prey and enjoy its fear before killing it. Max Allen ran across the dusty plain, once green but now dead, like many areas of the planet. He kept up a steady pace that left him far ahead enough of the pursuing aliens, but left him still able to sprint if needed. But not so far ahead they used their rifles. He was well aware of their past as pack hunters, and used that to his advantage. Alan also knew they were unaware that humans had also once been pack hunters, but took down larger prey by running it to exhaustion. They might not be able to keep up with the speed of their prey, but they'd make their prey flee and pursue them until they stopped or dropped. While humans no longer chased mammoths or wild cattle, their bodies retained the ability to run great distances without overheating, with the right training. And Alan had learned that lesson in an Earth ravaged by the Alei and their minions. Alan spotted his destination less than a mile ahead. He just needed to make it to those rocky hills. With one last look back, he picked up his pace. Just before reaching the rock pile near the dry stream bed leading up the hill, he stumbled and fell. When he got back up, he was limping, but still making for his goal. He heard his pursuers give some kind of shout, and then pulse rifle shots began to impact around him. One was close enough that he gave out a scream and fell, and then crawled behind the nearby rock pile. He heard the alien slow and begin to approach him. He saw the shadow of one of the aliens alongside the rock. As the Alpha moved around the corner of the rock pile, it saw the human's legs. It gave a feral grin as it finally got to look upon its mortally wounded prey. But instead of a dying human, the Alpha found the barrel of a shotgun pointed at his head. The Alpha barely had time to recognize the danger before the blast hit it square in the face, turning it into a mass of bloody meat. At the sound of the shotgun blast, a cacophony of deafening weapons fire erupted from the hillside ahead. The crack of rifles, the roaring of the machine guns, and the hammering of the .50 caliber were joined by the shouts and screams of the aliens as the high-velocity packets of metal tore into their bodies. Their light armor was unable to offer much protection at this range. And in a matter of moments, it was all over. The only sound was the groaning of the wounded and dying aliens. Almost 24 humans stood up from their concealment and began walking amongst the aliens, looting the dead and finishing off the wounded. A human with 3 stripes on his arm approached the corpse of the Alpha and turned to speak with the other man. He looked down at the pool of blood on the ground. "You injured?" asked the sergeant. "Nah, Daniel." Picking up the empty bag that had previously contained some of his blood drawn before the mission. "Just a little theatre for our friends here," Corporal Max Allen replied. "But someone else can be the bait next time," he added, as he exchanged his running shoes for combat boots. The sergeant, Daniel Reyes, laughed. "That's what happens when you are the best distance runner we have." Max returned the compliment with the one-finger salute that just made Sergeant Reyes laugh that much harder. "Let's finish stripping the bodies and get out of here before any of their buddies show up in assault craft," Sergeant Reyes yelled to his men. Corporal Allen collected his gear that was hidden beneath the rock pile and began collecting enemy gear. Weapons, ammo, and any useful gear were collected and examined before packing them up for transport. The humans dragged the alien bodies under an overhang and kicked some dirt on them, just enough to hide them from an aerial search. They loaded their gear and alien equipment onto the motley assortment of military and civilian vehicles hidden in a ravine on the other side of the hills. Dirt bikes, four-wheelers, 4x4s, and a Humvee were hidden on the other side of the hill. Splitting up to confuse any pursuit, they headed to their base in the nearby mountains.